This point was also discussed how Arjuna gave various reasons. So fourth reason of Arjuna for not fighting, that was kind of refuted by Lord Krishna, that Varna Sankara will be produced by fighting. That was Arjuna's conclusion and Arjuna's understanding. So then Krishna is telling, by not fighting, there will be Varna Sankara, because people will not follow the right standard of authority of Shastras, and then there will be Varna Sankara. So that was repeated.
Yes.
In this context only, we discussed about we should be doing Anusharan, not Anukaran. Instead of imitating, we should be following the instruction. And we also discussed in details that what is imitation and what is following instructions. So for imitation, people generally do for cheap publicity, for their own sense gratification. And but in that spirit is lost of why we should be doing.
Right.
So like example, people do Ras Leela and smoke ganja. So instead, we should be doing following instructions of Acharya.
Right. Okay, good. Yes, Suresh.
Yesterday you told that one more thing, that it's very difficult to change the nature of Jiva. That we have to just engage that conditioned nature in Krishna's service.
Right. So we cannot prematurely overcome it and jump to a higher platform.
Prabhupada mentions about the common man has to follow at least 5 Mahayagya, that Panch Yagya.
Panch
Mahayagya. That
Name
is
them?
Brahma Yagya, and then Deva Yagya, Bhut Yagya, and Niri Yagya, Pitri Yagya.
हो गया, 5 हो गया.
हाँ. And
ठीक है. Then we discussed that leader of the society, especially the teachers, the governments, and all the leaders, they should be tested thoroughly through their character. Even if they are less qualified in educationally, but character should be tested thoroughly. Otherwise, there are a lot of people who will find fault. So we have to be careful, because through our behavior we can attract many, and through our behavior we may repel many. Right. Prabhupada quoted in English saying, Caesar's wife should be above suspicion. Prabhupada did quote that. What is it?
When Arjuna thought instead of fighting, he want to go in a forest. That time Krishna said, instead of doing this, you better do your dharma. Because if you went forest, then by 3 modes of nature, you will fight also there with the tiger, that because that is nature. Because 3 modes of nature forcefully person act due to that 3 modes of nature.
Right.
So you have to do your dharma better.
Nai kashchanapi jatu tishtatya karma karyate hi avashya karma sarva prakriti jair gunai. Okay, fine. So we'll proceed ahead. So towards the end, we were discussing how should a person who is in knowledge deal with the ignorant. Say something on that. Okay. And पीछे आपका हो गया.
He said, like Krishna mentioned that instead of we should not disturb the fruit who is
Those
attached
are
to
ignorant.
the fruit. Those are ignorant. So like instead we should encourage them to take on to the detached work.
So what we should not tell them to do?
We should not tell them to means like
Stop
the working.
Yes.
Inaction we should not do.
Yes. So just because they're attached to the fruits, we should not tell them, give up the work and renounce the work. So then that is premature renunciation. So rather we should inspire them to perform
detached work.
Yes, detached work. So that's the last thing we were discussing in the 26th verse. Huh? Bolo?
So Prabhupada tells in the purport itself कि if one directly performs bhakti yoga, then he does not need to do any other things. So then we saw the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that bhakti by nature is so strong that it is not dependent on the purity of the heart. For
Yes.
Gyan, one requires some qualification, but bhakti
Right.
does not has any
Right.
qualifications.
So,
So we can directly come to bhakti and not waste time in another.
yes, that's one thing. In the context of what Krishna is saying,
Basically, nishkam karma yoga.
right. So on the path of bhakti, it is not required that one has to perform all the other prescribed duties. So on this path, one has to perform all the prescribed duties. By that, one will get purified. Then one can renounce. But on the path of bhakti, because bhakti itself is very purifying and potent, so therefore one can be even allowed to renounce some of the prescribed duties and directly take to the path of bhakti. So we tell people to give up all other dharmas, isn't it? Worshipping the devatas, or even, ideally speaking, even worshipping the pitris and obligations to society and nation. So many of these dharmas can be given up by taking to the path of bhakti, because bhakti is purifying. One need not do all these other dharmas to get purified. Yes. So then the next question arises. So here we are discussing, okay.
Yeah, like as you tell, bhakti is all purifying, and in our preaching we encourage people to give up all other dharmas. But in Shastras we see many great devotees like Yudhishthira Maharaj, and they are doing some sort of karmakandic activities like performing the
To set example with the proper understanding. So you'll see in Bharat Maharaj also, 5th canto, Bharat Maharaj also was worshipping devatas and all that. And that is just to set an example for the people in general, because everyone may not be on the platform or may not be qualified to practice bhakti. So then at least they should perform some sort of religious activity. So to set that example, so the kings, they would sometimes perform all these various yajnas, even though karmakanda yajnas, they may perform all that. But these kings, they were Rajarishis, and they had proper understanding that even though they're worshipping devatas, they're worshipping them simply as parts and parcels of the Supreme. So when one worships with the proper understanding to set the proper example, then that's not wrong.
On the other hand, like when that Bhagavatam verse comes, they were Shibhuta.
Yes, so that's for devotees in general. But then you're talking about kings. So these kings also have another responsibility, and that is to set the right example.
If we see the devotees in general, like pure devotees freed from all types of rid.
Okay, so now you're coming to the basic fundamental question: who's a pure devotee?
Yeah, no, I agree, Rosie. It's like one who is on the path of Krishna consciousness, he's also a pure devotee. But generally, nowadays we see this much trends in even in our society that people do perform some karmakandic activities, even though process of bhakti is given. Like for example, just like when a girl and boy are marrying, they check kundalis. As such, if they are devotees, then why to see kundalis then?
Okay, so now that is a specific purpose there, which Srila Prabhupada himself writes in his purports. So that is one usage of astrology that Srila Prabhupada himself allowed, and he has specifically written in his purports that this is necessary, because by doing that one checks the influence of the three modes on the two persons, because one is not yet free from the influence of three modes. So in that case, that is allowed. So that Prabhupada himself is allowed.
Apart from that, also like there are many things like Shraddha, offering Shraddha.
Yes, so Shraddha one may do, but then of course Srila Prabhupada has written in the first chapter here itself, first chapter purport, Srila Prabhupada has written that actually there's no need for devotees to perform. But then even though maybe social obligation, family obligation, one may do Shraddha, but then again, devotees when they perform Shraddha, they don't follow the Karmakandi procedure. They follow in the Vaishnava way. So then that's fine, because they do it in the Vaishnava way, then it's all Krishna conscious. Okay, invite the devotees, have kirtan, offer prasadam. So then it's all Krishna conscious. So then that's fine. But then some separate worship of the devatas, exclusive worship of the devatas without the proper understanding, that's not allowed. Right? That we don't encourage.
Generally, we don't do.
Yes. So then everything has its role.
Ruji, as you said that quoting from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, that commentary that bhakti is very powerful. So in the fold of bhakti, it is like one can give up work also and one can bypass this.
Not totally give up work, but one can give up some of the prescribed
Some
duties.
of the prescribed duties.
Yes.
So in that context, like bhakti is powerful, but that performer of the bhakti, that person may not have the adhikar. So how to distinguish with that?
See, performing bhakti means what? Chanting the holy names.
Yeah.
So holy names are powerful. Whoever chants, holy names are always powerful. And so therefore, because the holy name is powerful, the process of devotional service is powerful. So therefore, that process of devotional service itself very quickly elevates a person. And therefore, there is no pre-qualification to get purified because the process of bhakti itself is purified. Here, how it is, he has to perform his prescribed duties. The prescribed duties purify the person, then he becomes qualified for renunciation.
Mhm.
But on the path of bhakti, bhakti itself is so purifying that there's no need for any other purifying process.
Okay.
And such was Srila Prabhupada's conviction in the process that after devotees spent 4-5 years in Krishna consciousness, he gave them sannyas.
Mhm.
That was Prabhupada's conviction in the process, that bhakti is so purifying. And they were in their 20s, you can just imagine. That means everyone here should take sannyas. There was this Rishi Kumar Swami, he was 20 years old. 20 years old. So many of them were in 20s only when Prabhupada gave them sannyas. So why? Because Prabhupada had that faith that the process of devotion is so powerful that it will purify them. So he took that chance, he took that risk, of course, because many couldn't sustain that. Okay. So we are discussing the difference in the mentality of those who are ignorant and those who are in knowledge, and how those who are in knowledge should deal with those who are ignorant. So what is the mentality of those who are ignorant? That is being discussed in the next verse, 27. Prakrute kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Purport?
Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in the material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there is a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that his gross and the subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as such, his bodily and the mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna, in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesh, or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna.
Okay. So as Prabhupada is writing, two persons, one in Krishna consciousness, other in material consciousness, working on the same level, may appear to be working on the same platform, but there's a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. So the person who is ignorant, then he thinks I'm the doer. Ahankara vimodatma karta aham iti manyate. Of course, this we will discuss in detail when we come to the 5th chapter. So though there is a detailed discussion on who is the actual doer. But the person in material consciousness, he thinks, I am the only doer. So therefore, that is foolishness, because one is not the only doer. Why? Give some example to prove it. I'm not the only doer. Achyut bro?
Many people, they try for IIT, but not everybody goes into IIT. So not everybody is doer. Basically, no, we are not doer.
Okay, fine. Okay, good example. Pichut.
Isan bro, you already discussed. There we have mentioned that, although we don't plan to remember few things in exam, but although we read everything, we don't plan to that this I'll remember and this I'll forget. But on the spot, we remember something and we forget something.
Correct. Yes.
Case of farmer only. He does the tilling and sowing part, but rains are not in his hand, and the fertility of soil also is not in his hand. So that
Right.
depends on God's.
Yes, I pause. Gambling. क्या होता है गैम्बलिंग? मुझे तो पता नहीं, आपको पता है क्या होता है? मुझे बता.
That they think that we will definitely win, we will try our best to win that, but it's not in their hand. They lose the money.
Correct. Yes.
Prabhupada gives an example of that everyone want to become Tata and Birla, but very few of them become it.
Right. Good. So yes, so therefore it's only a foolish person who thinks that everything is in my hands. So Prabhupada writes, the person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. So even as devotees, we have to understand that the tendency still remains. If we do something big, we tend to take the credits. And when there's something wrong, blame others. So that tendency is there. So therefore, even when we do something good, we have to understand that I can't take all the credits. So that's simply due to ignorance. Further on, Prabhupada writes, the ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Rishikesh, or the master of the senses of the material body. For due to his long misuse of the senses and sense gratification, is actually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. 28. Tattvavettu mahabaho gunakarma vibhagayo guna guneshu vartanta iti matva na sajjate. One who is in knowledge of the absolute truth, the mighty armed, does not engage himself in the senses and sense gratification, knowing well the differences between work in devotion and work for fruitive results. So here, Krishna is continuing this discussion. What is the difference between a person who is ignorant and a person who is in knowledge? So one who is tattvavit, one who knows tattva, one who knows the absolute truth, then he understands that guna karma vibhagayo. So he understands that everything is happening by guna and karma. And so therefore, he knows that there is a difference between engaging himself in the senses and sense gratification, guna guneshu vartanta. So he knows what is the difference between being attached to the results and being detached from the results. If one works with attachment, if one works with detachment, what is the difference? He understands that. And that's what Prabhupada writes, that he knows his real identity as part and parcel of the Supreme, who is eternal bliss and knowledge. and he realizes that somehow or other he is entrapped in the material conception of life. In his pure state of existence, he is meant to dovetail his activities in devotional service to the Supreme Personality of God Krishna. He therefore engages himself in the activities of Krishna consciousness and becomes naturally unattached to the activities of material senses, which are all circumstantial and temporary. He knows that his material condition of life is under the supreme control of the Lord. Consequently, he is not disturbed by all kinds of material reactions, which he considers to be the mercy of the Lord. Okay. Okay, let's read this commentary. Read. Take it, Badu.
Chakravarti's commentary on 3.28. The intelligent person, however, knows the truth, tattvavit, about the division of gunas and actions. Guna karma vibhagayo. The division of the gunas are sattva, rajas, and tamas. The division of action are according to the effects of gunas. Devata, sattva, senses, rajas, and sense objects, tamas. One who knows the nature of these two is called tattvavit. The senses, such as the eye, guna, administrated by the devatas, are engaged with the sense objects such as form, guneshu. The intelligent person is not attached. Knowing this, he thinks, I am not at all the senses, nor the sense objects. There is no relationship between me and the senses or the sense object at all.
Right. So that's the correct understanding. So one who is in knowledge, one who's tattvavit, he understands that I am separate from the senses and the sense devatas and the sense objects. So that's what he's referring to here. So the division of action are according to the effects of the gunas. So guna guneshu. So the devatas are in sattva, the senses are in rajas, and the sense objects are in tamas. So basically one understands that I am separate from all of this. And so therefore he does not become entangled in the influences of the senses and the sense objects. Again, this point also is repeated in the 5th chapter. 29. Prakruter guna sammudha sajjante guna karmasu tan akritsna vido mandan kritsna vinna vichalayet. Bewildered by the modes of material nature, the ignorant fully engage themselves in material activities and become attached. But the wise should not unsettle them, although these duties are inferior due to the performer's lack of knowledge. Okay, so here again he's describing how one should deal with those who are ignorant. Okay, purport.
Purport. Persons who are unknowledgeable closely identify with gross material consciousness and are full of material designations. This body is a gift of material nature, and one who is too much attached to bodily consciousness is called manda, or a lazy person without understanding of spirit soul. Ignorant men think of the body as the self. They accept bodily connections with others as kinsmanship. The land in which the body is obtained is their object of worship, and they consider the formalities of the religious rituals to be end in themselves. Social work, nationalism, and altruism are some of the activities for such a material designated person. Under the spell of such a designations, they are always busy in material field. For them, spiritual realization is a myth, and so they are not interested. Those who are enlightened in spiritual life, however, should not try to agitate such a material engrossed person. Better to prosecute one's own spiritual activity silently. Such a bewildered person may be engaged in such a primary moral principles of life as non-violence and similar materially benevolent work. Men who are ignorant cannot appreciate activity in Krishna consciousness, and therefore Lord Krishna advised us not to disturb them and simply waste valuable time. But the devotees of the Lord are more kind than the Lord because they understand the purpose of the Lord. Consequently, they undertake all kinds of risk, even to the point of approaching ignorant men to try to engage them in the acts of Krishna consciousness, which are absolutely necessary for the human being.
Okay, so this is also similar to the 26th verse. Krishna is telling one should not, na vichalyate, one should not disturb them. Vichlit mat karo. Don't disturb those who are manda, sammuda and manda. Okay, guna sammuda, those who are bewildered by the three modes, and those who are manda or lazy to understand self-realization. So for such people, Krishna is saying those who are kritsnavit. So there are two words used, akritsnavidaha and kritsnavit. So akritsnavida means those who do not have knowledge, and kritsnavit means those who are in knowledge. So how should those who are in knowledge deal with those who don't have knowledge? Krishna is saying, na vichalayet, don't disturb them, don't agitate them. So it is similar to that 26th verse. So Krishna is basically telling that don't unnecessarily disturb them, then they would give up the performance of their work itself. And they may think that, oh, this work is useless, it is simply entangling, binding. They may prematurely renounce the work. So therefore Krishna is saying, don't disturb them. Let them continue their performance of work, whatever they're doing, slowly they'll get purified. Okay, but then again, Srila Prabhupada is speaking about devotees. And so as far as devotees are concerned, then devotees are more merciful than the Lord. And they even take the risk of disturbing those who are ignorant and giving them bhakti, because then again the same point, because bhakti is very purifying. Anyone who even begins the practice of devotional service, then they can quickly get elevated. Okay, read this commentary.
Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on 3.29. If the jivas are separated from the senses and the senses object without relationship to them, then why is it seen that people are attached to the sense objects? This verse answers. By absorption in the senses made of matter, jivas become bewildered. Just like a man possessed by a ghost thinks himself a ghost, the jivas absorbed in the senses made of matter think themselves to be the senses. Then they become attached to the sense object, guna karmasu. The man who knows all Krishnavid,
not
does
Krishna, not Krishna, Krishna.
Krishnavid, the man who knows all Krishnavid does not disturb those who are ignorant. He does not attempt to make them realize that they, as jivas, are different from the senses, that they are not the senses. Instead, he engages them in actions without desire, which will remove the absorption in the senses. One does not cure a man possessed of a ghost even by instructing him even 100 times. You are a man, not a ghost. Instead, one curses him by using
cure. Ilas, cure.
Cures.
Curse mat do bhai, always.
Instead, one cures him by use of mantra, jewels, and medicines, which will remove that application.
Okay. Okay, so nice example he's giving. So a conditioned soul is attached. He misidentifies himself with the senses, sense objects, all that. And so therefore, Krishna over here is saying that don't unnecessarily disturb them, and he does not attempt to make them realize that they as jivas are different from the senses, that they're not the senses. So if one tries to teach philosophy to a materially attached person, it doesn't work. So right in the beginning, if one tries to give only philosophy, then it doesn't work. They won't understand. So therefore, he's giving the example of the ghost-haunted person. So you tell the ghost-haunted person 1,000,000 times, you're not ghosts, you're a human being. He's ghostly haunted. How will he be able to understand? He won't understand. It's just like trying to make a mad person understand that he's not prime minister, he's not president. It doesn't work. So first of all, he has to get cured of the disease. Then he will understand. And so therefore, first of all, therefore he says, So instead, he engages them in action without desire, which will remove the absorption in the senses. And therefore, again, the same point, encourage them to perform Nishkam Karma Yoga. Encourage them to perform their respective duties without attachment to the fruits. Gradually, they'll get purified. Then they will actually understand the philosophy. Okay, so the same principle applies even for us. And that's what we see Srila Prabhupada did in the early days. Of course, Srila Prabhupada was always having his classes, but then Srila Prabhupada laid great stress in the initial days on Harinam Sankirtan, distribution of prasadam. Okay, so that was his main emphasis. And that's how they gradually got purified. And then gradually they began to understand the philosophy. Of course, Srila Prabhupada, right from the beginning, he was giving the philosophy. How much of they could understand, they understood. But the main thing is that the purification took place by the holy name and prasadam. And then gradually they began to understand the philosophy. That's what Krishna is telling over here. Don't disturb them. Don't disturb them. Don't directly try to give them gyan. Don't try to bring them to the platform of gyan, renunciation, give up work. No. So let them gradually get purified by the performance of prescribed duties. When they get purified, gradually they'll understand. All right? So now, after having spoken all this, okay, let's take this. You're the only devotee of Krishna at your workplace. How will you help your associates change the quality of their work from mundane to transcendental? Okay, we already discussed in one sense. Bolos. Okay, sure.
As Krishna told Arjuna to not disturb materialist, so I'll not ask them to change their way of working or engaging more in Krishna conscious activities. Rather, I would request them to give their fruits, like whatever they are earning, that they can give little bit as a donation to temple. And I'll also share prasad.
Okay. Ujjwal Prabhu?
In my daily dealing, I will try to be little bit Krishna conscious, like saying Hare Krishna and other things. And by that way, I will make him slowly to come close to bring him temple and all that.
Okay.
And then slowly.
So yeah, so gradually we have to help them purify themselves, and then gradually they will understand. Okay. So, of course, Srila Prabhupada, as we know, in the initial days, he hardly he told them the rules and regulations, but he didn't really push them. Of course, these were initial days, very initial days. We can't do that now. But in any case, the point is that according to the level of the people, then we have to deal with them accordingly. I'm sure everyone knows that famous pastime of Shyam Sundar Prabhu making the Jagannath deity. He was smoking and put the cigarette on Jagannath. So we see how Srila Prabhupada expertly dealt with that. What did Prabhupada say?
Between you and Jagannath.
Correct. Yes. So Srila Prabhupada didn't chastise him, didn't do anything. He just said, why the small thing between you and Krishna? But then that was because it was with so much of compassion. So it acted so powerfully that Shyam Sundar Prabhu, he took it up very seriously. And then I think so every week he reduced one cigarette or something like that. And then gradually gave up. So that's how Srila Prabhupada, he dealt with people according to their level. And then he didn't push them too hard. Of course, those were very initial days. Then later on, of course, if you hear the later lectures of Srila Prabhupada, then Srila Prabhupada was very heavy. And then Srila Prabhupada said, you don't follow the principles, you're an animal. So that's the meaning of adjusting on time, place, circumstances. So that's the expertise of the Acharya. So, but the point still remains that one should know how to deal with those who are ignorant and gradually help them purify themselves. So after hearing all this, Arjuna may wonder, okay, so what am I supposed to do? What is instruction for me? So therefore, in the next verse, Krishna gives a direct instruction to Arjuna. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashi nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigata jvara. Therefore, O Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me, with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. Purport.
This verse clearly indicates the purpose of Bhagavad Gita. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties, as if in military discipline. Such an injunction may makes things little difficult. And nevertheless, duty must be carried out with dependence on Krishna, because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. The living entity cannot be happy independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because the eternal constitutional position of the living entity is to become subordinate to the desires of the Lord. Arjuna was therefore ordered by the Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. One has to sacrifice everything for the good will of the Supreme Lord, and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. Supreme Lord is the soul of all souls. Therefore, one who depends solely and wholly on the Supreme Soul without personal consideration, or in other words, one who is fully Krishna conscious, is called Adhyatma Chetasa. Nirasi means that one has to act on the order of the master, but should not expect fruitive results. The cashier may count millions of dollars for his employers, but he does not claim a cent for himself. Similarly, one has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. That is the real purport of Mai or unto me. And when one acts in such Krishna consciousness, certainly he does not claim proprietorship over anything. This consciousness is called nirmama, or nothing is mine. And if there is any reluctance to execute such a stern order, which is without consideration of the so-called kingsman in the bodily relationship, that reluctance should be thrown off. In this way, one may become vigata jvara, or without feverish mentality or lethargy. Everyone, according to his quality and position, has a particular type of work to discharge, and all such duties may be discharged in Krishna consciousness, as described above. That will lead one to the path of liberation.
If you remember, right in the introductory slides, where we saw Baldev Vidyabhushan and Vishnu Chakravarti's commentary on the constitution of the entire Gita. So if you remember, one of the points they mentioned was that even though predominantly there are these three sections of the Gita dealing with Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, but what? Yes, but all of them, all the three sections have all these components with predominance of one. So now here in the first 6 chapters, you'll see that essentially Krishna is speaking about karma and jnana. But in between, he throws in little bhakti. Correct? So the first drop of bhakti was given in the 2nd chapter. You know which was? Where Krishna gives direct bhakti, where Krishna is talking about directly worshipping me. Where does that me come? Me. ऑनलाइन कोई तो बोल रहा है कहाँ है बेटा? ओह अच्छा, आश्रम में। अच्छा, where is me?
मत पर है प्रभु जी 2.60
हाँ,
तानि सर्व 2.61 प्रभु जी तानि सर्वाणि
वो कहाँ,
संज्ञा
कुछ माइक रखना पड़ेगा वहां पे। हाँ, करेक्ट। 2.61 तानि सर्वाणि संयम्य युक्त आसित मत्परः वशेयसेन्द्रिय तस्य प्रज्ञा। That is the first drop of bhakti Krishna has put there, where he's directly talking about worship me. And here you find the second tablespoon of bhakti. Here again you find what? Mai sarvani karmani, mai, unto me. This is direct bhakti when Krishna is saying unto me. Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa nirashi nirma bhutva yudhyasva vigatajvara. Unto me. Surrendering all your works unto me. So this is direct bhakti Krishna is speaking about over here. So Krishna does that in between because that's the ultimate goal. But then he gives these indications. So here Krishna is giving a direct instruction to Arjuna, Mai sarvani karmani sanyasyadhyatma chetasa. So surrender all your work unto me with full knowledge. Completely giving up. Sanyasya. Adhyatma means with full knowledge of the self, in that consciousness. So Krishna is giving a direct instruction to Arjuna. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada, he says that this verse clearly indicates the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. Because the verse is indicating what? Bhakti. So bhakti is the ultimate purpose of the Bhagavad Gita. And that is what Krishna is indicating here. The Lord instructs that one has to become fully Krishna conscious to discharge duties as if in military discipline. Such an injunction may make things a little difficult. Nevertheless, duties must be carried out with dependence on Krishna because that is the constitutional position of the living entity. So why Krishna gives such an instruction? The living entity cannot be happy independent of the cooperation of the Supreme Lord, because that's the eternal constitutional position of the Shiva. So Srila Prabhupada in his lectures, he says that sometimes when people hear Krishna telling such words, surrender unto me, and then later on, of course, Krishna says it very directly, Sarvadhanam Parajam Mam Ekam. So some people, this is too much. Why only Krishna? People ask now sometimes, why only Krishna? And that too, Krishna himself is propagating it. It's not good, no? Person himself is telling, you surrender to me only. Ah, that is what they say. Exactly. He's very proud. Very egoistic. That is why he's saying, surrender only unto me. So people find it very difficult to accept. That's why Prabhupada is writing here. That makes the things little difficult. So when people hear of surrender, following rules, regulations, then people get a little afraid. But Prabhupada is writing here that, yes, it is required as in military discipline. So how many of you have experience of military discipline? Okay, Shubham Prabhu, tell what experience you have.
In my school days, I used to play cricket with season ball. So if we were late for practice, we had to learn do the rounds with bat in the hands, and then we have to bowl. We'll not be allowed to bat, and means we'll be on the field throughout the day. Like it was.
Achha, that was punishment.
Yeah, strict punishment. Next day, everyone would be on time. Rarely there were like we were not on time.
This is one of those military schools, huh?
Oh, I'm speaking about like academies are there in each district, cricket academies.
Oh, you're talking about cricket academies. How is it connected to military?
Like they're very strict that if I do something wrong, so it should go deep in the mind that I'm not supposed to do this again.
Okay, okay, fine. Okay, thank you. Anybody has direct experience of some military? Huh?
Actually, when I was in NCC,
Hmm.
8th, 9th standards, that all the 10 candidate, their hands should move like all
One
hundreds,
direction.
one direction. If anyone wrongs, that the in charge come and directly smash him.
Smash means what? Break the skull?
ऐसा बोलता था, खा डालूंगा, खाऊंगा. और पूरा लातों से मारता था, football जैसा. He used to treat like a football. And if any comes late or give that counter answer reply, so he gives punishment that like make that 10 rounds to that track, and just by like raise your hands up and make 10 rounds. So if anyone
Only
got
chanting was remaining.
तो ऐसा तो रिप्लाई बैक रिप्लाई चाहिए नहीं था उनको.
हाँ, उल्टा जवाब.
कुछ नहीं.
सही बात. बोलो. अरे साधु को कैसे मिलिट्री डिजाइन?
When I was connected with RSS, my school days.
Acha.
So in that there were many rules which we have to strictly follow. Like in cold season we have Sheet Sivir.
क्या?
Sheet Sivir, like cold season in December. So Sivir, like from all over the like Khand they have make the divisions in all the states. So every December there used to 3 days camp that is called Sheet Sivir. And that every leaders who are leading the sakhas and all, they have to come. And there with cold water you have to take bath in morning 4:30, 5 o'clock, and then come for the pitch, like all the activities. And then we have to wear the knicker only, half pant, like that is compulsory. No any. And they have to follow the whatever superior tells, blindly they have to follow. There is no any excuse. You cannot any demand any things, whatever they do. So that we have experience in schools.
Correct.
That is like military type.
We have seen there are quite a few people from RSS who have become good devotees within ISKCON. Huh? Yeah, there are quite a few. Because
of this Bhakti. So for a country, they are ready to lay down their life also.
Correct.
And they have left many of their, in like we are preacher here, like we are monks, they call their pracharak in Hindi. So their pracharak also did not get married and they only serve the country. They roam all over the country and they try to unite people like more Hindu and all.
So some sort of selflessness is there, correct? Yes. So therefore, they are able to take up devotional service also because that same mood of selflessness is there. Right. So yes, so we find that military discipline is very strict. And here as Prabhupada is writing, what is writing? Arjuna was therefore ordered by Sri Krishna to fight as if the Lord were his military commander. So of course, we don't have commanders, but actually Srila Prabhupada, he gave this post of commander, temple commander. In every temple, Prabhupada, he... actually in those days, there were only 3 posts. There was a temple president, temple commander, and treasurer. There used to be only these 3 posts during Prabhupada's times. But this temple commander was actually started by Srila Prabhupada himself. He wanted this. And now also in most temples, there are temple commanders. In most temples, there are temple commanders. So, so Prabhupada is writing here that why? Because Krishna consciousness also, that type of military discipline is required. Okay, so why in military that discipline is there? Why that discipline is there in military? Okay, before that, I'll tell you one short story to illustrate military discipline. Of course, if you go to cantonment areas, if anybody has lived in cantonment areas, then you will see the military people. Every day morning, they have to go jogging with all their armor and paraphernalia. So it's all very rigorous, everything on time. So just to illustrate this, I heard this story from one senior devotee. So there was one military soldier. So he did some mistake. Some mistake he did, maybe came late or whatever. So then his superior, he was very upset. So the superior gave him punishment that in this big field, under the hot sun, it was summertime. So under the hot sun, you stand and throughout the day, you keep saluting. Under the hot sun. So that was the punishment he got. So then there was another senior person who was senior to the previous senior who gave the punishment. So as he was going around, he saw this very strange scene. There is this man in the middle of the field and he's saluting. So he came there and he asked, Are Baba, who has given you this punishment? So he told him, no, this happened. So that officer, he gave me this punishment. Achha. So he called for that officer who gave the punishment. So then he asked him, how did you give this punishment to this man? Don't you know the rules of military discipline? So according to military discipline, the rule is if someone salutes, there must be someone to receive the salute. So don't you know this rule? How did you give this punishment? So then he told that officer who gave punishment to stand over there and receive the salute. Right. So that's how they're so particular about all this, about their etiquettes and their standards and all that. They're very particular about all these things. So that's the etiquette. Those of you, if you have ever seen the Republic Day parade, now Republic Day is coming. So you see all those bands and all those people, they march past. And then when they come in front of the president, they salute. And what the president has to do? He has to accept the salute. He has to salute. I think for the president, such a big austerity. So many people go past and they offer the salute and he has to, every time somebody salutes, he has to salute. So this time it's a she. Anyway. So anyway, so the point is that that's the etiquette. That's the etiquette. Okay. So then why in the military there is such a strict discipline? What is the purpose? Is it simply fanaticism? Ujjwal Prabhu?
Sweat in peace, less you bleed in war. So that's
more you sweat in peace, less you bleed in war. Okay, so what's your purport?
It means that if you practice, automatically that practice will help you in actual situation when it will come.
Okay, that's correct. Yes, somebody would like to add to this. Okay. Bol.
Two things I noticed and I heard also that first thing they're taught that at any cost, at any point of time, they should be understanding that they have to follow. if they are not following, then what will happen at the war? At the orders, like we see, if soldiers are there and they're not following the commander, then there nothing can't be done. No cooperation, nothing. So first training for them is whatever officer's order is there, they have to follow in whatever is be the situation. Second thing, they cannot retract, which means they cannot pass over responsibility. They cannot like run away from responsibility, because that is not expected when war is there, which is life and death sentence. So
Right.
that's
So
it.
the main thing, the discipline is meant for the war. Correct? So in the war, when the commander orders, at that time there is no time to think. Should I follow? Should I not follow? I had this fight with this commander. Should I follow him or not follow him? So if somebody wastes time, by the time everything will be finished. No. There is no time to think. So therefore they are trained to follow, so that in the war, then they will obey. So then the war, they're able to, things are able to go smoothly. So that is why there is all this training, cooperative spirits. So as Suraj Prabhu was telling, so, and we see that in their march past, all the hands, all the legs, everything in synchrony, absolutely. Requires a lot of practice, correct? But then that is the team spirit, together. Okay. How is that relevant for us in Krishna consciousness?
So in Krishna consciousness, we are also like disciples of spiritual master and so Guru Parampara. So if disciples are then the words come from discipline. So if you are disciplined, then we'll also able to cooperate nicely and take this movement ahead.
Right. So we were talking about war. So are we facing any war going through?
So we have war against Maya.
Yes. So which is a more severe war, which the soldiers face or which we face?
We face Maya.
Who's more powerful?
Maya is more powerful.
And that war comes occasionally, correct? Occasionally, once in a while, some big war. How often we have war? Huh?
Every second, 24/7.
How many of us realize that? But that's the fact. Every moment is a potential war. Every moment is a potential. And so therefore, the discipline that is that a disciple should have is also meant for that same purpose. So that in this war against Maya, one can be successful. And therefore we find in the Vedic times, disciples were trained in that way and things were very strict. I'm sure many of us have heard the story of Upamanyu. Right? You've heard the story of Upamanyu? Somebody tell in short.
Basically, Upamanyu was disciple of Dhamma Rishi. So
he had three disciples, predominantly. Who were they?
Yeah.
Aruni, Veda, and Upamanyu.
Yeah. So actually he was going out for begging, and the principle is whatever you beg, you have to give it to a spiritual master. So whenever he used to go out for begging, and firstly he was not giving to spiritual master. Then this principle was told to him. Then he starts giving everything to spiritual master. But his spiritual master saw that still he's getting fatter and fatter. So then he asked, how you are getting fat? I'm not giving you any much to eat. Then he said, I am going to beg out again. So then he said, no. Whatever you beg, you have to give to spiritual master. And in course of few days, again, he saw that he's still maintaining his obesity. So then his guru asked, why, how is it possible? Then he says he is drinking the milk of the cows. Then he told, no, you cannot do that also. So that is for calves. So in few days, still he maintained his. So then his spiritual master asked again. Then he's told that actually in the mouth of what do you call calf, there is fame. foam of milk. I'm taking that. So then, no, he said, no, you cannot do that also. And then at one point of time, he was asked by his spiritual master to go to forest to bring some wood. And but he was feeling very hungry because by nature he was addicted to eating a lot of things. So he was not getting to eat anything. And then at one point of time, he fell into a ditch.
He ate some poisonous leaves.
He ate some poisonous leaves, and he fell into the ditch.
Became blind.
When he became blind, and then his spiritual master came. They were searching for him throughout the night. At one point of time, they found him, and that time, a spiritual master comes to him and he tells the whole story to spiritual master. So spiritual master invokes Ashwini Kumaras, and they gave him some medicine. But
rice cake.
Rice cake, yes. And then he said, I cannot eat it. I have to first offer it to my spiritual master. So then
his eyesight came back.
Yes.
When he understood the principle. So yes, so you find in the Vedic times, so these and as we read in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam also, Narad Muni is telling how in the Vedic times, unless the Guru calls the disciple to come and eat, the disciple would not eat. And if the Guru would forget, then disciple has to fast. This was Vedic times. Things were very strict. Of course, we may not be able to literally apply those things in the current day. Of course, the gurus are there, their representatives are there, and they have given sanction. But the point is, the principle has to be understood. The principle is that this was discipline in the ashrams in the Vedic times. Things were very strict. And so why? Why? Because that was a training. That was a training so that the disciples are trained to follow the instructions. And that following instructions is for whose benefit? The disciples' benefit. So in his lectures also you'll find Prabhupada so many times. Disciple means discipline. So that discipline is there ultimately for the benefit of the disciple only. So, because in this war against Maya, if one is not strict in following the discipline, then Maya will take over very easily. Even if somebody as elevated as Bharat Maharaj. Even though he was so elevated, little laxity in following the rules and regulations, we know what happened. That's how strong Maya is. Therefore, if you read those purports in Bharat Maharaj section, then you'll find this is what Prabhupada emphasizes in those purports. Following the rules and regulations very strictly. That is what he emphasizes. There's no choice. There's no choice. And so therefore, we find that even during Srila Prabhupada's times, actually, Srila Prabhupada, he set those standards, and some of the temple presidents were actually very strict. So his own is Giriraj Maharaj. So we heard this. So once a devotee, he when Giriraj Maharaj was the temple president in Juhu, so one devotee, he had gone home to US. He had gone to his home in the US, and he said he would come back, say, after a week. And so without telling Giriraj Maharaj, this person, he extended his stay for a few more days. And then when he came back, so Giriraj Maharaj is quite soft-hearted, but still, he told this devotee, you can continue to stay at your home. So we find that time, those days, temple leaders and Temple presidents were actually quite strict. And right, there are quite a few instances like that. So the whole point is, as Krishna is telling over here, that there is no option. One has to follow. So therefore he's saying it's like military commander. And that is for the benefit of the disciple. If one follows, then one will be saved. One will be saved. If one does not undergo this training and one is not trained to always follow, then the mind will take over. Then the mind will take over. Then instead of properly following the standards, the mind will set its own standards. And how many cases we see these things happening? The moment the mind is given choice, then the mind will become dhila. Mind will say, okay, do this, do that. Yesterday we were telling about how Srila Prabhupada emphasized the morning program, Juhu. So why Srila Prabhupada himself was so strict about all these things? Prabhupada was very strict about all these things. So why? Because if one gives a slight leeway, slight laxity, Maya will take over. And then the nature of Maya is, you give little time, okay. One day you didn't attend Mangalarti, anything happened? Nothing. 2 more days, 3 more days. Like that it'll go on. So therefore, so actually devotees, as they grow in spiritual life, on their own initiative, they should be strict. Because it is for whose benefit? Our own benefits. Right. So here, further on, Prabhupada writes, one has to sacrifice everything for the goodwill of the Supreme Lord and at the same time discharge prescribed duties without claiming proprietorship. And another very striking statement Prabhupada is writing. Arjuna did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute his order. He did not have to consider the order of the Lord. He had only to execute it. So that is military discipline. No questions asked. Why, what, when? No. Do it. That's all. So, yes. Now, the next point that Krishna is saying is Nirashi, Nirmamo. So, Nirashi means no asha for fruits. As Prabhupada is giving the example of the cashier. He may count so many millions of dollars, but he cannot put one thing in his pocket. He cannot be attached to that money. He has to just do his duty, give everything. So this is one point which Krishna emphasizes right from the 2nd chapter till the 18th chapter. Work without fruitive desire. This is one thing which Krishna emphasizes right from the beginning till the end. Why? Why? Pure devotion. Because the tendency to enjoy fruits is so strong in the material world. Because why we are in the material world? For enjoying. So therefore the tendency to enjoy the fruits is very strong. Therefore Krishna keeps hammering this point right from beginning to end. You have to perform your duty without attachment to the fruits. This is one point which Krishna emphasizes like anything. Because the moment one is attached to the fruits, what is the result? Bondage. Bondage in the material. And the tendency is very strong. And so even after we come to devotional service, the tendency is very strong. The tendency remains. So anyway, book distribution marathon just got over. And so sometimes many things happen. Distribute by hook or by crook. Once we had gone for, this was many years back in Kunjberi temple. So during marathon once we had gone for book distribution in one company. At that time, in those days, I don't know, these days, it's not so much, I think. No? Those days, distribution in companies was one of the prominent ways of distribution. So the employees didn't have to pay. So we would just take down their names and their number or something like that, and the amount would get deducted from their salary. You still do it now? Okay. Okay. Something. Anyway, that time this system was quite prominent. And so many companies would invite us, and people also would take because they don't have to pay cash. It's an illusion, but whatever. So anyway, so we had gone to one company for distribution. Usually the strategy would be to distribute sets. So Bhagavad Gita along with some few small books. So we had gone to one company, and so we had made sets like that, say Bhagavad Gita, 2 small books, and 1 calendar. So now, so the calendar was supposed to be free of cost. So now the devotee who was leading that particular book distribution team, so now what he said, so we will say that the calendar is free, but it is not actually free. So what was the plan? So say those days Bhagavad Gita was some 70 rupees. So say Bhagavad Gita 70 rupees, 3 small books of 10 rupees each, total of 100 rupees. So you make a set like that, and you give a calendar free of cost. So then what he said was, okay, so what we will do is, so okay, instead of saying Bhagavad Gita is 70 rupees, we'll say it is 75 rupees. And one small book, instead of saying 10 rupees, we'll say it's 15 rupees. So then what happens? We are compensating for the calendar. Correct? So the calendar, we are saying it's free, but is it free? No, it is not free. We are putting it in the price of the books. And in that way, we earn something more. So, so then the other devotees who were distributing, so we asked this leader, so but if the person asks for individual prices of books, then they will come to know that the calendar is not free. And he said, see, don't worry so much. See, most people will not ask. That was the usual thing, they would say, okay, set kitna hai? 100 rupees. So they would go like that. Nobody would ask individual book kitna hai. So he says, see, most people don't ask. And if at all somebody asks, you can show them the pre-marathon rates. Instead of showing marathon rates, you show pre-marathon rates. Then they won't take it so seriously. So we were not so convinced about it, but since he was leader, so we said, okay, fine. So then what happened is, as Prabhupada says, you can fool some people some of the time, but not all the people all the time. So now there are hundreds of people coming to take the books, but some people are smart. Some people are smart. So then everyone has value for their money. So then some people actually got into details. Okay, show your rates chart. Then they started seeing, okay, before marathon this much, marathon this much. So then some people said, "Arey, what is this?" So then devotees, they did some word jugglery, this, that, and somehow got away. So I also happened to be one of those members of that team. And I saw this whole show here. So then next day, so the same leader, he was going to go to another company with the same strategy. So I was not very happy with this. So then I still remember, this is so vivid in my memory. So next day, this devotee was going to go immediately after the Bhagavatam class. And so during Bhagavatam class, I called Radhesham Prabhu aside. And I told him, this is what happened yesterday. In fact, that distribution went on for 2 days in that company. You know, there are different shifts and all, no? So 2 days, the distribution went on. Of course, many books went. So then I told Radhesham Prabhu, this is what happened. So then Radhesham Prabhu called this leader of that book distribution team. And he told him all the books were loaded, everything was loaded the next day for going to the company. Radhesham Prabhu said, first unload everything. First unload everything. So he said, see, in one company, if they come to know what we have done, what will happen? Yes, they will send the message to all the companies that these Hare Krishna people are cheaters. And what they will do? All of them will ban. No more book distribution. So why we are telling all this? The tendency for results is very strong. And so therefore, of course, ISKCON had quite similar experiences in the past. Those of you have heard some history, then in those days of the airports, where people would be in a hurry to catch their flights. So then they would give some books to them, they would give the money, and then they're supposed to give some change. So instead of giving change, they would dump some more books in their hands and say, move away from there. And they would say, Arey, what is this? We don't want all these books. No, take. So there were so many strategies like that which were employed in those days. ISKCON did get quite a bad name, and some airports even banned devotees. So the point is, fruitive mentality is very strong. And the tendency to somehow get results and scores and all this is very strong. But as they say, penny wise, pound foolish. We may get some temporary scores, but if it is done in wrong ways like this, what will happen? Yes. At some point of time, the reaction will come. Some point of time, the reaction will come. So therefore, and we see this in so many places, so many places. You know, some cheating techniques here, there, so many things happen. Why? The same reason. The fruitive mentality is very strong. Fruitive mentality is very strong. And sometimes people go even, forget about spirituality, even, it's not even mundane morality. People go below even mundane morality to achieve results. And then ultimately, for some time, the show may go on. It doesn't go on too long. All the repercussions will come. Someday they will come. And one will have to face all the reactions. One may think, now I've got along, but someday the reaction will come. Prabhupada in so many lectures, he says, laws of material nature, very stringent. One may escape. We were hearing Prabhupada's lecture the other day also. No? In the material world, one may escape. The government or the police, one can escape. But government's, I mean, Krishna's laws, no way. There is no way to escape. If not today, tomorrow, one will have to face the reaction. So that is why Krishna is telling you, Nirashi, don't be attached to the fruits. Don't be attached to the fruits. So, Prabhupada in many lectures, Prabhupada says here. So therefore, one should earn money simply by honest means. Whatever Krishna gives, be satisfied. Honest means. And then nirmama. Nirmama means the mentality of I and mine. I am the doer. So one does the activity and then claims, I am the doer. I've done it. I and mine. So therefore, then one has to give up this mentality. Otherwise, kartaham iti manyate, vimoodatma. So that's what Prabhupada is writing over here. That similarly, one has to realize that nothing in the world belongs to any individual person, but that everything belongs to the Supreme Law. That is the real purport of Mayur, unto me. And this consciousness is called nirmama. He does not claim proprietorship over anything. This nirmama, nothing is mine. So again, just like we were discussing in Karmanyavadikaras. So somebody may think, okay, I have to simply follow instruction. Nothing is mine. No fruits, nothing. So what will be the result? Laziness. Why to do the work only? Okay, fruits are not for me. I can't take even credit for doing something. Why work only? So then what Krishna says? Vigata jwara. Giving up laziness, fight. No, no laziness in performing the duty. Duty has to be performed with full enthusiasm. But at the same time, don't be attached to the fruits and all this. Okay. So these are some important instructions Krishna is giving Arjuna and through Arjuna to all of us. Okay, one, you had some question? Okay, you can.
So Prabhuji, I just wanted some clarification. This like fruity mentality you were saying, na? So we did VEC, value education contest. So when we go for announcement, na? So we hide bit details, not explicitly announced, just like for example, for the first prize, they have to go on their own transportation cost to Bangalore. So that generally we don't make the announcement that, because then children get discouraged. So we have to spend. So is it correct or it's wrong?
See, I'm not getting into details. So these details, you contact your authority. Whoever is the authority, you contact him. Right. But we are talking about principles. The principle is that whatever we do, we should be honest. Now, of course, for the sake of preaching, for the sake of some transcendental purpose, some cheating may be required. Prabhupada did speak about transcendental cheating. He gave the examples of, Sanatana Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami. Who else? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Acha, take a sannyas. But Nityananda Prabhu cheated Mahaprabhu by taking him to Shantipur instead of Vrindavan. So yes, we do find some cases. So there is that statement you can read in the Bhagavatam, first canto, 13th chapter, when Dhritarashtra and Gandhari left without telling Sanjay and Yudhishthira Maharaj. So there Sanjay is lamenting, "Arey, what? This person, he's cheated me. Throughout the life I served him as a secretary, and he all of a sudden at night he went." So there Srila Prabhupada writes that famous sentence, "Great souls cheat for great cause." There are two conditions. What? Great soul, great cause. So before cheating, we have to know whether both the criteria are fulfilled. Whether we are great souls and whether we have a great cause. So if we want to clarify with authorities. No, Prabhupada is making a general statement in the purport, not specifically referring to Dhritarashtra. He's making a general statement. Great souls. Huh?
It is said, "Phalena parichyate."
Yes.
With results, we see the.
Yes.
So you are saying fruits not get attached, not get attached, but phalena is required.
Okay, you explain.
So we should work hard, mostly from my side it is. So we should work hard for the fruits, but not attached to the fruits.
That's right. That's right. As somebody said, while working, we should work so enthusiastically as if the results depend on me. We were discussing, when we were discussing Karmani Vadakarasi, we were discussing all these points. Otherwise, that verse can be misused. We were discussing. So while working, one should work with full endeavor, as if the results depend on me. But when the results come, one should be detached. Otherwise, if one thinks, "Arey, Bhagwan hi dene wale hai, jitna dena hai dene do, main kya karu?" Aram. So no, not that's why Krishna is saying here. What Krishna is saying? Vigata jwara. Give up the feverish mentality of lethargy. Give up lethargy and fight with full enthusiasm. So here, Arjuna, after he understood the Bhagavad Gita, he understood 100% that Krishna is in full control, right? Already in the 11th chapter, Krishna shows Virat Roop. He shows that he himself has killed everyone. He only has to become an instrument. So then how Arjuna was fighting? He was fighting, "Theek hai, kuch." No, he was full enthusiasm. So that's the point. So we have to work with full enthusiasm as if results depend upon me. But then ultimately we have to know results depend on Krishna. Take Hare Krishna. 10 minutes break. Okay. So in this way, in the 30th verse, Krishna has told Arjuna, and through Arjuna is telling all of us how it is very important that we follow his instructions and surrender all one's works unto him. So now, in the next two verses, Krishna tells what will be the result of following Krishna's instructions and what will be the result of not following Krishna's instructions. 31. Ye me madam midam nityam anuthishtanti manavaha shraddhavanto anusuyanto muchyante tepi karmabhi. Those persons who execute their duties according to my injunctions and who follow this teaching faithfully without envy become free from the bondage of fruitive actions. So those who me matam, my injunctions, those who follow my injunctions, how? Nityam anutishtanti. So as one's nitya karma, as one's dharma, one always follows Krishna's injunctions. Anutishtanti, Prabhupada translates as execute regularly, manava. So that's following Krishna's rules and regulations is meant for manava, not for cats and dogs. They can't understand. So when they follow how? Shraddhavanto anusuyanto, with faith and without envy. So when they follow like that, the result will be muchante tepi karmabhi. Then they'll be freed from bondage of fruitive actions. Prabhupada begins his purport by saying the injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is the essence of all Vedic wisdom and therefore is eternally true without exception. So the injunctions of the Shastras are, as they say, trans-contextual. They're not according, the application may vary according to time, place, circumstances, but the principles are always applicable. They're always applicable. So that's what he's saying. Eternally true without exception. So therefore, when we talk of Shastra, one can't say that, okay, now this is applicable, now this is not applicable. No, the principles are always applicable. The application of the principle may vary according to time, place, but the principles are always applicable. As the Vedas are eternal, so this truth of Krishna consciousness is also eternal. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying the Lord. So there are two conditions there. Firm faith and without envy. So if one is envious, then it's very difficult to follow. Correct? If one is envious, then all the time one will ask questions. Why should I follow? Why can't I make my own laws? And Prabhupada, many lectures, he says, you can make your own laws. Maybe you can follow at your home. Nobody else will follow. So they will never be liberated from the bondage of fruitive action. But an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunction of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the law of karma. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful, see, this is an important statement. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. So what's the important qualification? One is not resentful, and second is sincerely follows. So that means one may not be able to 100% follow all the time, but at least one has full faith that I should follow, and one sincerely tries to follow. Because we are sadhakas, because one is a sadhaka, so many material conditionings. So sometimes one may be successful, sometimes one may not be successful. But then, as long as one understands that this is the principle I need to follow, and one is sincerely trying to follow, then Krishna appreciates that sincerity. That's also, as we'll discuss later, the mode of the verse apichet suduracharo. Now, if one does not follow, what is the result? Next verse. Ye tvetad abhyasuyanto nanutishtanti me matam sarvagyana vimudam sthan vidhi nashtan achetasaha. But those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them regularly are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. So this is the result of not following. Why one does not follow? Abhyasuyanto, because of envy. Why? Who is this Krishna to tell me what to do? This is envy. Who is he to tell? No, I won't follow. So if out of envy one does not follow, who is at loss? Who is at loss? The person who does not follow. Therefore, the other day in the Bhagavatam class we were discussing, Chitraketu Maharaj is saying that one who does not follow the injunctions of the Lord is envious of himself. So he's envious of the Lord, that is one thing. But by envying the Lord, he actually becomes envious of himself because he causes harm to himself. He doesn't know what is his well-being. Nate vidu swartha gatim Vishnu. He doesn't know what is his swartha. So that's what Lord is saying. If one does not follow because of envy, then He is Sarvajnana Vimudha. He is bereft of all knowledge. Sarvajnana Vimudha. Proper in the translation, word to word, he says perfectly befooled. Not only just Mudha, Vimudha. Special Mudha. Perfectly befooled. Vidhi Nashtan Achetasa. So he is ruined, Nashtan. All his endeavors will be ruined. As Prabhupada writes, the flaw of not being Krishna conscious is clearly stated herein. As there's punishment for disobedience to the order of the Supreme Executive Head, so there's certainly punishment for disobedience to the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A disobedient person, however great he may be, is ignorant of his own self and of the Supreme Brahman, Paramatma, and the Personality of Godhead due to a vacant heart. Due to vacant hearts. So what is the vacancy? Yes, lack of Krishna consciousness. That is the vacancy. So then because of that vacant heart, vacuum, we were discussing some other classes, because of the vacuum in the heart, so then vacuum has to be filled with something else. So then that vacuum becomes filled with sense gratification. Because somewhere one has to find some satisfaction. So if one is not finding satisfaction in devotional service, one will definitely try to find satisfaction somewhere else in materialistic activities. So therefore, Prabhupada is writing, due to a vacant heart. So the vacancy is lack of Krishna consciousness. Then one thinks, okay, somehow I'll try to satisfy myself by sense gratification. Then it is all Nunam Pramatta Rute Vikarma Yad Indriya Priti Aprinati. Yes, that's what it is. Okay, so now in the next verse, Krishna is speaking something very interesting. Sadrisham cheshtate swasya prakrutir jnanavanapi prakrutem yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. Even a man of knowledge acts according to his own nature, for everyone follows the nature he has acquired from the three modes. What can repression accomplish? So Krishna is saying, so what we see in the world is, even though one knows, if I don't follow, I will be punished. But in spite of knowing, the action of three modes is so strong. The modes force a person to act. Prabhupada many times he says, the thief knows. If he does a crime, if he robs, he is going to be punished. He knows it. But still, by the influence of the lower modes, he thinks, देख लेंगे थोड़ा, इस बार थोड़ा और चालाकी से करें, कुछ नहीं होगा. So the modes force him to act because he has that desire. So because he has that desire, the modes force him to act, even though he knows. And so therefore, what Krishna is saying? Jnanavan api. Not ordinary person. Who? Jnanavan api. Even though the person may be Jnanavan, but still he acts according to his swasya prakrute, his own nature. His own nature. He acts according to his own nature, even though he may be learned person, Jnanavan api. He acts according to his prakriti, his nature. So therefore, Krishna is asking a sort of rhetoric question. What can repression accomplish? Repression means daba ke rakhna. So if a person is told, don't do this, you'll be punished, don't do this. Doesn't work. Why? The modes push him. Okay, read the purport.
Unless one is situated on the transcendental platform of Krishna consciousness, he cannot get free from the influence of the modes of material nature as it is confirmed by the Lord in the 7th chapter, 7.14. Therefore,
Everyone
even
knows 7.14, famous verse. Yes, Deveshu
Devi
Gunamai
Eshu
Mama Maya
Duratta.
Duratteya. Okay, continue.
Therefore, even for the most highly educated person on the mundane plane, it is impossible to get out of the entanglement of the Maya simply by theoretical knowledge or by separating the soul, separating the soul from the body. There are many so-called spiritualists who outwardly pose as advanced in the science, but inwardly or privately are completely under the particular modes of nature which they are unable to surpass. Academically, one may be very learned, but because of his long association with the material nature, he is in bondage. Krishna consciousness helps one to get out of the material entanglement, even though one may be entangled in his prescribed duty in terms of the material existence. Therefore, without being fully in Krishna consciousness, one should not give up his occupational duties. No one should suddenly give up his prescribed duties and become a so-called yogi or transcendentalist artificially. It is better to be situated in one's position and to try to attain Krishna consciousness under the superior training. Thus, one may be free from the clutches of Krishna's Maya.
So why Krishna is speaking this verse? So Krishna wants to tell Arjuna that it is not possible to become free from the influence of the three modes simply by renouncing. That's what Arjuna wants to do, correct? He wants to renounce. He wants to renounce, go to the forest, meditate. So that's what Krishna already told. If you're not qualified for it, by the influence of the lower modes, you may sit in one place and meditate, but Yastvindriyani Manasa, the mind will continue to contemplate on the sense objects. So that's what here also Krishna is saying, that so the person may even know that if I perform this activity, I'll be punished. But unless he is purified, it is not possible for one to give up all of a sudden. One has to be purified. And that was what we have been reading in the Bhagavatam 6th canto, in the beginning of the 6th canto. That was the conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukdev Goswami, correct? Yes. So Shukdev Goswami is giving various solutions to become free from the sinful mentality. So initially he says, okay, perform prayaschitta according to karma kand. But Parikshit Maharaj says, that's kunjara shauchavat, that's elephant taking bath. So by the process of karma kand, jnana kand, all these other processes, the sinful mentality does not go. So that is what Krishna is telling over here. So even though a person may have theoretical knowledge, that's what Prabhupada is explaining in the purport. So many people may have theoretical knowledge of body and soul. They may know the Shastra, they may know the injunctions of the Shastra, they may know all that. But still, they may not be able to practice because it's simply on the theoretical plane. So simply having theoretical knowledge is not sufficient. There is no dearth of scholars in this world. There are many people who are scholars in Shastra. But as we were discussing even yesterday, what is more important and what people are looking for is what? Living examples. Those who follow the Shastra, that is what people are looking for. And one of the prime reasons why so many people were attracted to Srila Prabhupada, because they could see that here is a person who not only just speaks, but who follows. That is what attracted. And so therefore, Krishna is saying that simply by theoretical knowledge, even if you tell the person, you do this, you'll be punished, it doesn't work. It won't work. So therefore, you're thinking of going to the forest and thinking you will meditate. but your nature will go along with you into the forest. So therefore, it's very difficult to give up that nature. That's what Krishna is trying to tell over here. Okay, let's read this commentary of Baldev Vidyabhushan. Okay.
Even the man in knowledge of scriptures acts according to his desires. All men act according to their desires. What can instruction of threat of punishment accomplish?
Okay, so every person acts according to his desires, and desires are influenced by three modes. Okay, so that is what Krishna is talking about. Prakriti, swasya prakriti. Prakriti means the three modes, and three modes influence desires. And then, even though, what can instruction or threat of punishment accomplish? That's what Krishna says, nigraha, repression, threat of punishment. Okay, continue.
The scripture says that there is a punishment for those who do not follow the instructions of you, the Lord of all being. Do they not have fear of you? Even a person who knows the punishment stated in the scripture, Gyanvan, acts according to the Sadrisham, his evil nature, Swasya Prakriti, his sinful impressions which have been present since beginningless time. What then to speak of the person who does not even knows what does not know even who does not even know about the punishment? All people, Bhutani, follows Yanti their sinful vasanas, Prakritim, even though those desires cause of the destructions of a very goals they pursue, Artha Dharma, Kam, and Moksha. For a person devoid of association of saintly persons, even if he has knowledge of scripture, what can punishment accomplish? He will not be able to destroy the strong influence of those bad vasana. However, by saintly association, he destroys the bad vasana even if they are very strong. The Smriti says, Ato dusangam utsrijya sastu sajate buddhiman. Santa evasya chindanti mano vyasangam uktibi. An intelligent person should therefore reject all bad association and instead take up the association of saintly devotees, whose words cut off the excessive attachment of one's mind.
So here, of course, he is giving the solution to the problem, right? So he's saying, therefore, it's very difficult to give up these sinful tendencies, vasanas. The impressions are there since time immemorial. So simply knowledge of the Shastras, simply threat of punishment, all this doesn't work. So the person has to be purified by saintly association. That's the solution. But anyway, Krishna is addressing the point here that he's trying to tell Arjuna, you cannot change your nature. You cannot change your nature. That's what he's trying to tell. Okay, 34. Indriyasyendriyasyarthe ragadvesho vyavastito tayo navashamagacche taviyasya paripantino. There are principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to the senses and their objects. One should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they're stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. So, because everyone has his nature, has his vasanas, and a person is forced to act. So therefore, in order to regulate the senses, there are vyavastito. That means some regulations to make everything vyavasthit. Hindi word, no? Vyavasthit. Marathi also. So vyavasthit means everything is in order. Just like, of course, difficult to give this example on Indian roads, but there are supposed to be rules and regulations on the road. For what? So that the traffic is vyavasthit. So that is proper. So therefore, in the scriptures also there are rules and regulations so that people behave properly and not come under the influence of material raga and dvesha. We had that whole discussion on raga and dvesha. So everyone is bound by this raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion. So that one does not become influenced by the material raga and dvesha, there are rules and regulations. But then he says that even though there are rules and regulations, tayona vasham agachet. So one should not come under the control of such attachment and aversion because they're stumbling blocks on the path of self-realization. Purport.
Those who are in Krishna consciousness are naturally reluctant to engage in material sense gratification. But those who are not in such consciousness should follow the rule and regulation of the revealed scriptures. Unrestrained sensuous enjoyment is the cause of material
engagement.
But one who follows the rule and regulation of the revealed scripture does not become entangled by the sense objects. For example, sex enjoyment is a necessity for the conditioned soul, and sex enjoyment is followed under license of marriage ties. According to the scripture injunctions, one is forbidden to engage in relationships with any woman other than one's wife. All other women are to be considered as one's mother, but in spite of such injunction, a man is still inclined to have sex relationships with other women. Those propensities are to be curbed. Otherwise, they will be a stumbling block on the path of self-realization. As long as the material body is there, the necessities of the material body are allowed, but under rule and regulations. And yet, we should not really upon the control of such allowances. One has to follow those rules and regulations unattached to them, because practice of sense gratification under regulation may also lead one to go astray. As much as there is always the chance of an accident, even on the rail roads, although they may be very carefully maintained, no one can guarantee that there will be no danger even on safest road. The sense enjoyment spirit has been current a very long time owing to material association. Therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is very chance of falling down. Therefore, any attachment of regulated sense enjoyment must also be avoided by all means. But attachment to Krishna consciousness or acting always in loving service of Krishna detach, detach one from all kinds of sensory activities. Therefore, no one should try to be detached from Krishna consciousness at any stage of life. The whole purpose of detachment from all kinds of sense attachment is ultimately to become situated on the platform of Krishna consciousness.
Right. So here, so Krishna is saying that in this material world, everyone is controlled by raga, dvesha. Try to get what I want, avoid what I don't want. That is what we find in the material world. And so therefore, this is basically sense enjoyment spirit. To regulate the sense enjoyment, there are rules and regulations. But now, Srila Prabhupada is going one step ahead and saying that one should not simply be attached to the rules and regulations, because simply attachment to the rules and regulations will not work. So Prabhupada is giving the example of marriage. So in India, we still find many marriages take place, correct? Now, how many married people strictly follow the rules of married life? Difficult to say. And what to speak of even married men having illicit relations? Correct? Why? Because even though they are following rules and regulations, but the enjoying spirit is still there. So even though they're following Shastra, right? They're following Shastra, they're following the Shastric rules and regulations, getting married. But just by following the rules and regulations of Shastra does not mean that the enjoying spirit will go away. Correct? So therefore, it is not about simply following rules and regulations. So just like somebody may follow, like practical example, we see it all the time. On the roads, when do people follow traffic rules? When there's camera or police. So as long as they know somebody is watching, I'll be fined, I'll be punished, they follow. The moment the person is not there, finished. Then red signal, green signal does not matter. We all have experience of this. That is the principle. That is the point Krishna is speaking about. So he says, simply being attached to rules and regulations will not work because the innate nature of the soul to enjoy is so strong that the person will be pushed to go against the rules and regulations, even though he knows them and even though he may follow for some time. Therefore, Prabhupada is saying, so the royal road, they're following there on the royal road. What is the royal road? Following Shastra. That is the royal road. But even while following, there is every tendency for accident. Because the enjoying spirit is still there. And that is why Prabhupada is, of course, giving the solution. But attached, so therefore he says, therefore, in spite of regulated sense enjoyment, there is every chance of falling down. So therefore, as we were discussing in the previous class also, it is not simply about rules and regulations. So that is like what? The tortoise trying to withdraw the senses from the sense objects. So that is following rules and regulations. But then, that is okay. But Prabhupada writes in the next verse, 2.59, what he writes? Such following of rules and regulations is meant for? Anybody remembers? Prabhupada writes, such following of rules and regulations is meant for? Neophytes. Is meant for neophytes. Because afterwards, one must go one step ahead and develop what? Yes, the higher taste. Then when one develops the higher taste, following of rules and regulations will become natural. So therefore, rules and regulations are essential. But then, if a person is not developing some higher taste, then in spite of the rules and regulations, he will find out expert ways to break the rules and regulations. That is what we find. And we were telling the other day, so okay, attendance is there for Manglarti. So then, because it's only about the rule, correct? It's only about the rule. So then, okay, come, mark P, attendance done, then go back and do whatever you like. That means what? Huh? So that he doesn't understand the purpose of the rule. That's what Rupa Goswami talks about in the Nectar of Instruction. Niyam agraha. Niyam agraha and niyam agraha. Simply following rules and regulations without knowing the purpose behind them. That is what will happen. That is what Krishna is speaking over here. So simply if there are rules and regulations, but there is no purpose, there is no goal, there is no higher taste, then rules and regulations will not work for long. And we practically see that. Even in the society of devotees, we practically see that. So one may have rules and regulations, but unless one does not understand the purpose, then how long rules and regulations work? It doesn't work. Then one will find expert ways to break them. That's all. To avoid punishment. Okay. Okay, let's read this commentary. Okay, this is Vishwanath Thakur's commentary on the previous verse. Wait, just a second. We have already read this. Okay, read anyways. Go ahead.
Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, 3.33. Would they not be afraid of not following your instructions, the instructions of the Supreme Lord or the instruction of a king? No, they are not afraid. Those who engage their senses for enjoyment, even if they are intelligent, cannot consider the orders of the king, the Supreme Lord. This is because of their nature. The Lord explains this in this verse. If the person of knowledge engages in sin, he will receive hellish punishment, just as a king punishes, and he will also bear infamy. Still, even the person of discrimination performs actions which yield a burden of suffering, following his previous sinful habits. Therefore, all follow after their natures. The instructions of scriptures, nigraha, made by me or the king in the form of Niskama Karma Yoga, are able to purify and enlighten the impure-hearted, and in the form of Jnana Yoga, are able to purify and enlighten the pure-hearted. But neither can purify the extremely impure. Nigraha kim karishyati. However, Bhakti Yoga arising from my unpredictable mercy can deliver even those most sinful persons, as the Skanda Purana says. My dear friend Narad Muni, you are glorified as the sage among the demigods. By your mercy, even a low-born person like this hunter immediately became ecstatic. This is called bhava or rati.
Okay, so basically the same point. So therefore, simply the rules and regulations don't help because a person will have to act according to his own nature. So therefore, what Krishna is trying to tell Arjuna is, before you renounce your work, you have to perform your work to purify this nature. So you have this nature, you have sinful propensity. Before you go to the process of jnana and renounce, you have to perform Nishkam Karma Yoga and get purified. That is what Krishna wants to tell. Next.
Since the rules and restrictions...
So this is the next verse. This is 34th verse.
Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, 334. Since the rules and restrictions of scriptures do not have effect upon those of evil nature, one should limit the senses if one is not under the influence of sinful nature arising from past sinful habits. That is described in this verse. The word indriya is repeated to indicate each of the sense object of each of the senses. Attachment, raga, for what is forbidden by scripture, such as giving gifts to others' wives, or seeing or touching their bodies, or repulsion, dvesha, for what is prescribed by scriptures, such as distributing gifts to, serving, seeing and touching the guru, the brahmana, the holy places and visitors are firmly fixed, visheshena avastito, in all the sense objects, form, smell, taste, touch and sound. One should not be under the control of attachment and repulsion. Another meaning is this: attachment means seeing a woman, object of the eye, and hatred for those that obstruct that enjoyment. Therefore, the mind is attracted
to what helps one attain one's goals. The mind is attracted to tasty, tender rice as it is favorable for one's goal. And the mind has dislike of tasteless hard rice as it is against the one's goal. One has attachment to hearing and seeing one's own sons, but dislikes seeing or hearing the sons of one's enemies. One should not fall under the control of such attachment and repulsion.
Yes. So one should not come under the control of such attachment and repulsion. So this is materialistic attachment and repulsion, right? Attachment to what is conducive to sense gratification and repulsion to what is not conducive to sense gratification. That's what most people are attached to. Therefore, there are rules and regulations. But Krishna is saying, in spite of rules and regulations, people may not follow because of their nature. The sinful nature is still there. So basically, why Krishna is speaking all this? Krishna is speaking all this to Arjuna. He's trying to tell him, see, you want to go to the forest, but you'll take your nature along with you. Your sinful nature you will take along with you. Then what meditation you'll do in the forest? So better is perform Nishkam Karma Yoga, first get purified, and then you think of renouncing. That is why Krishna is speaking all this. Okay. So therefore, in the next verse, Krishna says, this verse is repeated twice here, and again it comes in the 18th chapter. Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushtitat swadharme nidanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties even though faultily than another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duty, for to follow another's path is dangerous. Okay, purport.
One should therefore discharge his prescribed duty in full Krishna consciousness rather than those prescribed for others. Materially prescribed duties are duties enjoined according to one's psychophysical condition under the spell of the modes of material nature. Spiritual duties are as ordered by the spiritual master for the transcendental service of Krishna. But whether material or spiritual, one should stick to his prescribed duty even up to death, rather than imitate others' prescribed duty. Duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation and should not imitate others. For example, a Brahmana who is in the mode of goodness is non-violent, whereas a Kshatriya who is in mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principle of non-violence. Everyone has to cleanse his heart by a gradual process, not abruptly. However, when one transcends the modes of material nature and is fully situated in Krishna consciousness, he can perform anything and everything under the direction of a spiritual master, of a bona fide spiritual master. In that complete stage of Krishna consciousness, the Kshatriya may act as a Brahmana or a Brahmana may act as a Kshatriya. In the transcendental stage, the distinctions of the material world do not apply. For example, Vishwamitra was originally a Kshatriya, but later on he acted as a Brahmana, whereas Parsuram was a Brahmana, but later on he acted as a Kshatriya. Being transcendently situated, they could do so. But as long as one is on the material platform, he must perform his duty according to the modes of material nature. At the same time, he must have a full sense of Krishna consciousness.
Okay, so why Krishna is speaking this verse here? Yes, so basically Krishna is trying to say that you are Kshatriya, you perform your prescribed duty of a Kshatriya, then you will get purified of your sinful nature. That's how you'll get purified. So prematurely you try to become Brahmana, giving up Kshatriya dharma, you will not get purified. So therefore Prabhupada is writing that duties on the spiritual platform and duties on the material platform may be different, but the principle of following the authorized direction is always good for the performer. When one is under the spell of the modes of material nature, one should follow the prescribed rules for his particular situation and should not imitate others. So that is why Krishna is telling, see, you are a Kshatriya, you better follow this. By following it, you'll get purified. Don't try to artificially become a Brahmana. So here he says, performing a different dharma causes misfortune for the person. Bhayavaha. How? By creating sin. So previously also, if you remember, Krishna told, Arjuna's argument was, by fighting there'll be sin. And what Krishna said? By not fighting there'll be sin. By not performing one's dharma, that is sinful. That's what he's saying here. Since it is prohibited in the scripture. So in the case of Parashurama and Vishwamitra, there is no deviation from scripture, as Prabhupada is explaining, because they were transcendently situated. Okay, yeah, the same example. So by performing the last paragraph, by performing one's prescribed duties in the previous ashram, one decreases desire until one is qualified for renunciation. Okay, one performs prescribed duties, one will get purified of the material desires, then one becomes qualified for renunciation. The person can then practice non-violence because it then becomes his prescribed dharma. Thus, it is suitable that one who is situated in one's own dharma can later do this when he gets purified. All right. So now we go to the last section from 36 to 43. Nitya Vairina, eternal enemy lust. Okay.
Priji, here Arjuna is asked to act according to his nature. So many times there is a very fine line between spiritual duties and varna and ashrama duties. So can you please elaborate a little more?
Okay, so I think so. We had some discussion before also.
Yes.
So therefore, as we were discussing that time, these days it's very difficult to find out all these things. Who is Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Kalo, Shudra, Sambhava? Everyone is almost like Shudra. But still there are differences in propensities that we practically see. So somebody has Brahmana propensity to some degree, Kshatriya propensity some degree. So like that, there are differences. So ultimately, then whatever is instructed by the spiritual master simply follows. That's all. That is the practical thing to do. So whether it is material duty or whether it is spiritual duty, one simply consults the bona fide spiritual authorities and accordingly does it. That's all.
But then this verse, practicality is lost.
The practicality of this verse in the modern time is, whatever service is given to you, be satisfied with that. Don't try to do other service.
But sometimes we see devotees are more expert in other service than what is given to them.
That is the whole point. The whole point is, you may be expert, not expert. Whatever you're told to, you do. So if I'm not expert in something and I'm told to do something which I'm not expert in, what is the result? That's the point. If I always get service which I'm expert at, then what? It is sense gratification. Correct? I'm expert in something and I do the same thing all the time. Where is surrender? It's sense gratification. So therefore, then sometimes the spiritual master may give a service which is not according to one's nature or which may be difficult. But when the disciple surrenders to that instruction and does it, that's how he gets purified. So again, we were given that example of Tamal Krishna Maharaj. So he was very expert with that Radha Damodar bus party and kidnapping brahmacharis and all that. So he was expert. But then what Prabhupada said? Stop it. Stop it. Either chant under the tree or go to China. Difficult choice. But then he surrendered. He surrendered to that instruction and he went to China. And then Rameshwar Prabhu says that, so they went to China only for 6 months. They could not stay for longer. But then they laid the seeds of Krishna consciousness in China. And when he came back, Srila Prabhupada was so pleased. Srila Prabhupada was so pleased. And he tells how he gave him some specific service in the BBT. He gave him a very special service in the BBT because Srila Prabhupada was very pleased. So that's what. So that's the practical application for us. Whatever service one is given, whether I like it, I don't like it, it's according to my nature, not according to my, still one tries to do. Of course, one can always express, but then ultimately surrender.
And here in Prabhupada gives example of Vishwamitra Muni. And in 6th chapter also he gives Vishwamitra. But that case he gives a different one.
Yeah. So then Prabhupada gives example according to the context for what he's using that example. Right. So here he's using the example for one purpose. There he uses the same example for another purpose. So according to the context, then Prabhupada uses the examples.
But look, my question was like, it's like outside people may comment like you are just juggling words that.
No, it's not word juggling, it's fact. It's a fact, isn't it? So then, from the life of a person, one can learn different things at different times. So outside people may not understand, but then we are supposed to explain to them. Then what are we doing then? We are meant to explain, na? Just like one devotee was telling Srila Prabhupada, these days to preach to new people, very difficult. You know, these people, Kali Yuga, very difficult to preach. So Prabhupada said, if everyone is already a devotee, then what you are going to do? They are non-devotees, therefore you have to preach to. Okay, fine. So we go ahead. So now, because Krishna said that how it's very difficult to give up one's nature, the sinful propensity is very difficult to give up. So therefore the thought came to Arjuna, why? Why it is so difficult to give up? What is the cause? Therefore he's asking this question. The next verse. Arjuna uvacha atakena prayukto yam papam charati purushaha anichan api varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. Arjuna said, O descendant of Vrishnava, what is one impelled to sinful acts even unwillingly, as if engaged by force? Okay, so as Prabhupada writes, a living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme, is originally spiritual, pure, and free from all material contaminations. Therefore, by nature, he is not subject to the sins of the material world. But when he's in contact with the material nature, he acts in many sinful ways without hesitation and sometimes even against his will. As such, Arjuna's question to Krishna is very sanguine as to the perverted nature of the living entities. Although the living entity sometimes does not want to act in sin, he's still forced to act. Sinful actions are not, however, impelled by the supersoul within, but are due to another cause, as the Lord explains the next verse. Okay, let's read this. Okay, read this.
Nitya Vairina, lust, the eternal enemy. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on 3.36. Referring to verse 34 about raga and dvesha. In this verse, Arjuna asks about attachment to the objects of the senses, such as enjoyment with others' wives, even though it is forbidden by scripture. Though without desire to engage in sin because of knowledge of rules and prohibitions of the scriptures, anichan, by what influence kena prayukta does one engage in the act as if by force? This means that the desire for the object strongly arises under the influence of object stimuli.
Okay. So basically it's related to the 33rd and 34th verse. Krishna says that it's very difficult to give up one's nature. So therefore he's asking, what is that force which pushes the person to act against his desires? And then we know the famous verse. Krishna replies in the next verse, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Kamesha Krodha Esha Rajoguna Samudbhavaha Mahashano Mahapapma Vidyenam Iha Vairinam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is lust only, Arjuna, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. Okay? So Prabhupada is describing, I'm sure many of you have read these purports many times. Prabhupada is describing how originally there is love, and the love becomes transformed into lust, just like milk is transformed into yogurt. Okay, so we're not going into more details. I'm sure you've heard these things many times. Okay, 38. So now he is giving examples to illustrate different degrees of lust. धूमेनाव्रियते वह्निर्यथादर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भस्तथा तेनेदमावृतम्. As fire is covered by smoke, as a mirror is covered by dust, or as the embryo is covered by the womb, the living entity is similarly covered by different degrees of this lust. So the 3 degrees of lust that have been described over here. Okay, so just a summary of this. Okay, so here he talks about 3 degrees: shallow, deep, very deep. Okay, read.
Shallow example, the fire, though covered by smoke, still performs its function of burning. This is compared to human beings. By careful handling of the smoke and the fire can be made to blaze. Therefore, the human form of life is a chance for the living entity to escape the entanglement of material existence. In the human form of life, one can conquer the enemy lust by cultivation of Krishna consciousness under able guidance.
Okay, so this is smoke covering the fire. So that smoke can be removed, the fire can be still used. So this is called a shallow lust in the humans, because once again, the Krishna consciousness can be cultivated under able guidance. Next.
Deep example, mirror covered by dust. Because of the disappearance of its natural clarity, the mirror covered by dust does not carry out its function of reflecting images properly, though it is known as a mirror by its form, in spite of the dust covering it. This is compared to birds and beasts.
Okay, so in the case of the fire covered by smoke, very easily the smoke can be removed and the fire can be made to blaze. And once again, the fire performs its functions. But when the mirror is covered by dust, if it's a thick layer of dust, very difficult. The mirror is useless, correct? It cannot perform its functions. Unless the dust is thoroughly removed, the mirror cannot perform its function. So therefore, this is compared to a deeper degree of lust that is found in birds and beasts. So for birds and beasts in general, for them to revive Krishna consciousness is very difficult. And the next category is
very deep. Example, fetus covered by the womb. The fetus covered by the womb cannot perform its function of stretching its hands and feet. Its true form cannot be understood within that covering. This is compared to trees, such a great exhibition of lust that they are almost void of all consciousness. When lust is shallow, it is possible to remember the spiritual goals. When lust is deep, it is not possible. When it is very deep, one becomes unconscious.
Yes. So in the tree, so here the example of the fetus being covered by the womb. At least mirror, you can see the mirror. Correct? At least you can see the mirror, even though it's covered by dust. But in the case of the fetus, one cannot even see the fetus within the womb. So therefore, that is compared to very deep degree of lust that is found in trees. So that's how he's explaining the 3 degrees of lust. Next verse, he talks about the qualities of lust. What are the qualities? 39. Avritam jnanametena jnanino nityavairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena analena cha. Thus, the wise living entity's pure consciousness becomes covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So that's the quality of the lust. Never satisfied. Dushpurena analena. Never satisfied and which burns like fire. So Prabhupada is writing how this entire material world is Maithunya Agar, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of the Lord are shackled by sex life. Okay, so those are the shackles. So as long as one is attached to sense gratification, the more one tries to enjoy, the more the desires increase. So therefore, if one thinks that I will try to satisfy my desires, my material desires, sab shant ho jayega. Nahi, kabhi shant nahi hoga. The more one tries to satisfy, the more they increase. The more the desires increase. So this point we should always keep in mind. Prabhupada further writes, therefore this lust is a symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys, oh, this is a beautiful statement. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoy. Beautiful statement. It requires a lot of realization to write this. So when one tries to enjoy the senses, one gets some so-called happiness. But what is the result of that so-called happiness? That itself is the greatest enemy. Why? He becomes attached to it. He becomes attached to that so-called happiness, and therefore he tries to get that so-called happiness again. And in doing so, he gets entangled. So that's what happens in this world. So there is some so-called happiness in material life, and then one tries to get that so-called happiness again and again and again, not understanding that he will never get real happiness. He will simply get that so-called happiness, but that so-called happiness entangles him in material life. Was that? Yes, that's right. Yes. And so that so-called happiness, if he does not get that so-called happiness, then that's how the person becomes frustrated, angry. So initially one gets so-called happiness. Later on, he will not get that also. He will not get that also because he gets accustomed to it. Then he doesn't get the so-called happiness also. So that is why married life sometimes ends in divorce. Because one is expecting a certain happiness. When he does not get it, then he thinks, what is the use? Because the goal is that so-called happiness. But after some time, one does not get even the so-called happiness. That's the nature of material pleasure. Okay, so the next point that Krishna talks about is, so this is Mahashano, Mahapapma, Vairinam. This is the greatest enemy. So if you want to attack enemy, one must first of all know where the enemy is situated. Correct. Then one will attack. So therefore Krishna speaks about the sitting places of lust. Indriyani mano buddhir asyadhishthanam uchyate eter vimoyatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust. Through them, lust covers the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. So, Indriyani, Mano, Buddhi, Asya Adhishthanam. So, this is the Adhishthanam, the sitting places, Indriyani, Mana, and Buddhi. And the result of this Kama is what? Vimoha Yati, Jnanam Avritya Dehinam. So, this lust, it bewilders the living entity by covering his knowledge. Avritya Jnanam. Okay, read this purport.
But the enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul. And therefore, Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses. And thus, when we hear about the sense objects, the mind generally becomes a reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become the repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with the matter. And thus, with the mind and senses, the spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in Srimad Bhagavatam 10.84.13. Yasyatma buddhir kunapeti dhatuke swadi kalatradishu bhauma ijjidi yat tirtha buddhir shalilena karhichit janeshu abhigneshu sayeva gokara. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsmen, and who considers the land of birthplace worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge, there is to be considered like an ass or a cow.
Yes, so these are the places where the lust is situated. Yeah, this slide was specifically made by Ramanand Prabhu. So, so here he's explaining that how there are the senses, above the senses there's the mind, and all this becomes sitting place of the lust. And then there's the intelligence. So when one is in material consciousness, everything is influenced by lust. And then when lust is all pervading, then the soul also becomes influenced by the lusty intelligence. And that is how the soul misidentifies with the body and the mind. And that is called false ego. Right? So that's how the soul gets the false ego, that I am the body, I am the senses, I am the mind. And the only goal of life is sense enjoyment, how to satisfy. So now Krishna speaks about the solution. So the solution is Tasmat Tvamindriyan Yadav Niyamya Bharatarshava Papmanam Prajahiyenam Jnana Vijnana Nashanam. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning, curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Okay, purport?
The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and specific knowledge of the self. Jnana refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vijnana refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and his relationship to the supreme soul. It is explained thus in the Srimad Bhagavatam 2:31. Jnanam paramaguhyam me yad vijnana samvitam sarahasyam tad agyam cha grahana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the self and the supreme self is very confidential and mysterious, but such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if explained with their various aspects by the Lord himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us that general and specific knowledge of the self. The living entities are part and parcel of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness. So from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal condition. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principle of devotional service. So from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest professional stage of human life.
Tasmat tvam indriyani adau. So why Krishna is saying first, beginning, adau, one must control the senses. Why is beginning with senses? Okay, they give inputs. Any other reason? Why Krishna is saying first senses? They are grosses, correct? So Right. It's easier to control the senses than the mind. We all have experience, correct? Because senses can be engaged. And that is what Srila Prabhupada is saying. So anyone can begin Krishna consciousness. Anyone can engage senses. That's much more easier. But then controlling the mind is much more difficult, isn't it? Controlling mind. To control mind is very difficult. Arjuna himself says, more difficult than controlling the wind. So therefore, Krishna says, first engage the senses. Then it'll be easier. Then if the senses are all engaged, then the inputs to the mind will all be positive. Then the mind also will eventually be transformed. So now in the next verse, he is talking about the hierarchy of the senses, the mind, and the intelligence, and then how they can be engaged. 42. Indriyani paranyahor indriyebhya param manah manasastu para buddhi riyo buddhe paratastu saha. The working sense is superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Purport.
The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within the body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. These outlets are not in use when there is superior consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In Krishna consciousness, the soul makes direct connection with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the hierarchy of bodily functions, as described here, ultimately ends in the Supreme Soul. Bodily action means the functions of the senses, and stopping the senses means stopping all bodily actions. But since the mind is active, then even though the body may be silent and at rest, the mind will act, as it does during dreaming. But above the mind is the determination of the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. If, therefore, the soul is directly engaged with the Supreme, naturally all other subordinates, namely the intelligence, mind, and senses, will be automatically engaged. In the Katha Upanishad, there is a similar passage in which it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to the senses, and mind is superior to the sense objects. If, therefore, the mind is directly engaged in the service of the Lord constantly, then there is no chance that the senses will become engaged in other ways. This mental attitude has already been explained. Param drishta nivartate. If the mind is engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord, there is no chance of its being engaged in the lower propensities. In the Katha Upanishad, the soul has been described as Mahan, the great. Therefore, the soul is above all, namely the sense objects, the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. Therefore, directly understanding the constitutional position of the soul is the solution of the whole problem. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. A neophyte spiritualist is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of the senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by an intelligence one engage one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender into the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And even though the senses are very strong, like serpents, they will be no more effective than serpents with broken fangs. But even though the soul is the master of intelligence and mind, and the senses also, still, unless it is strengthened by association with Krishna, in Krishna consciousness, there is every chance of falling down due to the agitated mind.
Okay, so here you understood the hierarchy, right? First of all, there's dull matter, then senses, because senses manipulate the dull matter. Above senses, mind, above the mind, intelligence, and above the intelligence, soul. So therefore, as Prabhupada is writing, first of all, one should understand what is the constitutional position of the soul. So if one does not understand that, and one simply tries to control mind and senses, that will not work for long. Because if one simply tries to control mind and senses, then that may work for some time, but then the lower modes are very powerful. Then once again, they may fall down. But if one understands the constitutional position of the soul, and then one engages in Krishna consciousness, then all the remaining, that is intelligence, mind, senses, all of them will be controlled by engagement in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Prabhupada is actually putting it very beautifully. With intelligence, one has to seek out the constitutional position of the soul. So how one will understand the constitutional position of the soul? With the intelligence. One uses one's intelligence, understand the constitutional position of the soul, and then engage the mind always in Krishna consciousness. That solves the whole problem. Correct? So to understand the constitutional position of the soul, one has to engage the intelligence to understand the constitutional position of the soul. After understanding the constitutional position of the soul with the intelligence, what the intelligence has to do? Engage the mind, because the intelligence is higher. So when the intelligence is strong with understanding that, yes, I have to please Krishna, then even though the mind is trying to do some sense gratification, the intelligence will pull the mind back. No, don't do that. It's not good for Krishna consciousness. So that is how, when the intelligence is strong in trying to understand the constitutional position, then the strong intelligence will control the mind, and eventually the senses will also be controlled. So that is how, if one does not understand the constitutional position of the soul, then simply trying to control the mind and the senses intelligence will not be steady. And that is the example of Vishwamitra that Prabhupada gives. That because he was a yogi and he did not properly understand the constitutional position, then artificially trying to control the mind and senses cannot endure. Then when the sense objects comes, one may be agitated. So therefore, because the soul is the topmost, one has to understand the constitutional position of the soul, and then everything will fall in line. So therefore, of course, then again Prabhupada says, neophyte spiritualists is generally advised to keep aloof from the objects of the senses. So that is also required. But aside from that, so previous verse Krishna said, Tasmat Indriyani Adav. So one has to first of all control the senses. But aside from that, one has to strengthen the mind by use of intelligence. If by intelligence one engages one's mind in Krishna consciousness by complete surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then automatically the mind becomes stronger. And then the senses, even though very strong, they're like serpents with broken fangs. So that's how one engages all the soul, the intelligence, the mind, senses, everything is engaged in Krishna consciousness. And that's how one can control lust. And so therefore, the important point is to understand one's constitutional position and try to become more and more Krishna conscious. And to the degree one tries to become Krishna conscious, then automatically one engages everything in Krishna service. And the last verse, Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrum mahabaho kamarupam durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to the material senses, mind, and intelligence, O mighty Arjuna, one should steady the mind by deliberate spiritual intelligence, Krishna consciousness, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. And Prabhupada is summarizing the whole third chapter in his purport. You can read that. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purports to the third chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in the matter of karma yoga, or the discharge of one's prescribed duty in Krishna consciousness. All right. Okay, one question.
So this previous verse was 42, where this hierarchy is mentioned about Indriya. So actually, once in a book distribution, one person asked me this question, that this verse is there. He was little kind of scholarly type, Sanskrit analyzer and all. So he was asking that, you see here, manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe, yo, that yo refers to lust. It is not the soul, like that is, he was telling, because the whole context of the discussion is lust. It's saying that lust is more powerful than even the functioning of mind, intelligence, like that. So is there any acharya who talks about?
What does Prabhupada say in the word to word?
Prabhupada word to word, he is mentioned about this only. Ya means who, Buddha. And then in the translation, it's very clear. It's like he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence.
So one has to accept what the Acharya says.
Yeah. So like, is there anything else apart from this mentioned, like any other?
That is the meaning.
Yeah.
That is the meaning of the verse. So we have to understand the meaning of verses from the Acharyas, not Sanskrit Pandit.
Yes, obviously.
Right? So Sanskrit Pandit, he will have all this, so many meanings for the words and this and that. So many things can be done. And that's why there are so many misinterpretations of the Gita.
Yeah.
Because every word will have so many meanings. So therefore one has to understand the real meaning from the Acharyas. Hmm?
Translation Prabhupada gives working senses are superior to matter. But in purport, Prabhupada says in Katha Upanishad, there is a similar passage, and it is said that the objects of sense gratification are superior to senses. It's like contradiction.
See, either way it is correct.
Hmm.
So why objects of sense gratification are superior to senses? They're manipulating the senses. Correct? They're attracting the senses, they're manipulating. So therefore, from that perspective, okay, they are superior. But from another perspective, it is the senses which enjoy the sense objects. So therefore, from that perspective, that is. So both perspectives it is.
Also, Prabhuji, like it's like means in the previous verse we were discussing that senses are the most easy things to control, where they are the most accessible things, they are the gross
Correct.
things.
Correct.
So now if we see intelligence, Krishna is telling to strengthen the intelligence. So now intelligence is strengthened through senses only, na?
No, intelligence is strengthened through knowledge.
But knowledge is acquired through senses, na?
Yes, that is correct. The senses are just means to obtain knowledge. But the knowledge goes where?
Intelligence.
Yes, it goes to the intelligence. Just like I may say that I'm eating food with the mouth, right? But doesn't mean the mouth gets strength. Yes, the mouth will also get strength, but basically the food is meant for what? For the stomach. So similarly, one obtains knowledge through the knowledge acquiring senses, but the senses are just a means to obtain knowledge. But ultimately the knowledge goes where?
Intelligence.
The intelligence. Right. Okay. Okay, fine. We'll stop here. And so tomorrow we'll begin the 4th chapter. If somebody has some questions on this chapter, you can still ask tomorrow. But then we'll start the 4th chapter. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Ram, Hare. So was the speed okay or was it fast? Okay, here everyone is scholarly person. Heard these things so many times. Since 10 years you may be hearing all this, correct? At least 10. Yeah, that's what we are trying to do.